Can I live on just my pension? Well, raise your hands if you even have a pension out there. Like most people don't have pensions anymore. It's very reliant on their 401ks. And a lot of people are not properly funding their 401ks.
When you need some advice, never sacrifice, always get it right. Ask the Planman. Finance, insurance, and more.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Ask The Planman. I'm your host, Bruce Weinstein, and I believe everybody out there needs a plan in life, whether it's a financial plan, a retirement plan, a college plan, an exit plan, a tax plan, a weight loss plan. Today, I'm going to be kind of freestyling a little bit. We're going to be rolling out some new episodes where I'm going to get into some of the case studies and the different scenarios that I've been helping clients with over the years. Today, we're going to talk about getting over the hurdle or the finish line. Throughout my career, I focused very heavily on clients who are nearing and approaching retirement age. Whatever that might be, that's a personal decision, 60, 62, 65. But often a lot of clients don't understand what it takes to get to the finish line, and they've got a lot of moving pieces or variables that they need to address. What do I do about my health insurance? What do I do about rolling over my 401k? Do I have pension decisions to make in protecting my spouse? What about the back end? How do I avoid running out of money? How am I managing that money? What about long-term care? So all of these things, just because you're getting to retirement, doesn't mean you have to take your eye off the ball, or you can take your eye off the ball. You always have to be planning. So I want to share with you a little bit about what's going on with a client of mine. It's actually a personal friend, one of my fraternity brothers, and he's in his late 50s, and he's looking to retire in about 4 years. And we started breaking down all the components that he has to start dealing with in preparing and making that final decision. And so we're crunching numbers based upon a multitude of things. So what I want to do is break down some of those particulars, the homework that I've been giving him. And again, let me reemphasize this or make a point of this is it's not a simple 1, 2, 3 solution. This is going to take months and months of work and homework and preparation on his part. He's got to dig into things. He's got to learn about things he doesn't know about that he's been getting for 30 plus years at his company. And we have to keep breaking that down. So what my hopes are today is to help you. If this conveys to you, if you're in a corporate environment, you're getting benefits and you're getting ready to think about retirement in the next 5 or 7 years, well, what do I need to be doing here? And how do I start getting organized? So let's see if we could start to break that down. The biggest component that we start out with is budget. The budget is the pulse. It's your heartbeat. Without having a working, solid budget, well, how do you know what you're retiring to? How do I know what I'm actually up against? So your budget during your working years is equally as important as your budget in retirement. And you'll often hear me say, what am I retiring to? What is it that my lifestyle is going to be doing? What am I doing socially? How much traveling do I want to do? Am I a stay-at-home type person? Do I want to go out and see the world? And so we want to be able to give the clients the ability to spend and utilize their money as much as possible in their younger, healthier years, and then also make sure we transition into their later years without the fear of running out of money. Does that make sense for everybody so far? Allie, anything you want to jump in on? I got Allie here with me, folks. Say hi, Allie.
Hello. No, I think this is great. We're talking about kind of what to expect as you get near retirement age.
In this particular client situation, some of the challenges that he's facing, Allie, is what happens to his health insurance. He may, in all likelihood, not get health insurance provided to him, but he needs to find that out. Being a 30, 35-year veteran of his company, they may offer him a package that includes extended health insurance. But if he doesn't, he could be looking at a $2,000 plus month or more expense for those 3 years until he hits Medicare age. And we're not going to talk about Medicare here today, but certainly it's not going to cost $2,000 to be on any kind of Medicare platform or program. So it will be a substantially lower cost. But if he's going to retire at 62, he's got 3 years to bridge that gap. And we need to figure out in his budget, where's that money going to come from and what's he going to sacrifice instead? He's got some other goals in his particular situation. He'd like to buy a 1960s or 70s muscle car. Well, what kind of budget might that look like? Where does that money come from? And of course, we're here to facilitate. We're not here to judge. Not like, well, who are you to buy a muscle car? Like, well, that's what you want to do with your money. Isn't that what money's for? It's to do those things. So all his goals are broken down with he and his wife, and where they want to relocate to, where they want to retire to, bring down some of their expenses in retirement regarding their home costs, right? You've got energy costs, cable bills. Folks, there's fixed expenses, and then there's discretionary expenses, or committed and discretionary. And so when you're moving and relocating, there's certain expenses that are going to go with you. And then hopefully there might be expenses you can shrink or diminish. So he could move into a lower value home. He could bring down his property tax. He could potentially bring down his homeowner's insurance. But his cable bill could be his cable bill. His utilities are probably going to stay relatively the same. So some of those things will vary, and some of those things might be able to diminish. And that, again, is part of sharpening our pencils when we're talking about budget. All right. So he's got to focus on a budget. He's living on a certain amount of money now. And the question is, what is his revenue stream? What's his income stream going to be when he stops working? And so if you think about it, I use it again. A lot of analogies you'll hear from me is flipping the switch, right? Flipping that light switch from off to on. So when you're working, you're in accumulation stages. When you stop working, you're flipping the switch to now being reliant upon what you've accumulated: assets, pensions, Social Security. Now, how do you put all that together? Well, what do I get from Social Security? What will I get from a pension? And then what can my assets do for me once I'm done accumulating? And that's where it becomes a little bit of a slippery slope, Allie, because managing their money through their working years, the risks that they took, the portfolio management, in this person's case, a lot of his money's been tied in his company's 401k plan. He's got to figure out how to reallocate those assets, maybe take less risk, lower risk with those assets. And then ultimately what? Figure out an income stream. How do I get revenue from that? And then how much do I need to match that budget that we've just been forecasting? And so, folks, it's a very simple exercise. Everybody can do this themselves, whether they're close to retirement or not. It's called THP, take home pay. When you get your paycheck, first thing that's going to come out is usually your benefits, your retirement contribution, your health insurance benefits, and then, oh, Uncle Sam there, taxes. The net amount of money is your take-home pay. That's what you then have to pay your mortgage or your rent, pay your car expenses, put food on the table, your utilities, travel, savings. So it's very simple to figure out what your budget is, in a sense, because money's either spent or it's saved. So all I have to do is look at your paycheck and look at your savings accounts to know whether or not you're putting money away or you're truly spending every dollar that you make. So don't beat yourself up. It's a pretty easy exercise, unless you got a lot of money on credit cards. Well, then you're overspending, right? So your take-home pay is not enough because you've been running up credit cards. So when you're in retirement, we're trying to get a sense of what your take-home pay is, because you're not going to contribute to a 401k anymore. In this particular scenario, we still have to deal with medical expenses, health insurance, and then, of course, taxes. But in theory, my tax levels should be reduced. My tax obligations should potentially be less than when I'm working, but that depends on how much money you're deriving. Some people's taxes go up in retirement. How are you forecasting for that? What happens when the government decides to change your tax rates and raise the levels? And so now that's something I have to be prepared for. I'll throw another curveball in here, and that's inflation. How do I build a financial plan based upon 2% inflation, which we were at 2 or 3 years ago, and all of a sudden we're at 6, 8, 10% inflation now? And by the way, how long is that going to last? Is that going to last through the next election? Is that going to last the next 5 elections? Is it going to be a trend like we had in the 60s and the 70s? Or is it going to modify back? What's going to change that? But most importantly, how are you building that into your financial plan? So you have your budget, and tied to your budget is you have to have cost of living increases, meaning inflationary adjustments, because the milk and the eggs and the gasoline and the plane tickets, those prices tend not to go down, they tend to go up. So if I'm retiring at 62, by the time I'm 72, those expenses are way higher. In some cases, they may have doubled. Maybe by the time I'm 75 or 80, they've definitely doubled. When's the last time your home owner's insurance or your property taxes went down, Allie? Ever?
I got lucky at one point towards like 2012, but that's probably the last time.
Right. So, and that was because there was a housing crisis. So people went back and said, hey, I need my house reappraised in value because I lost 40%. Well, I bet those prices from 2022, from 2012, I think you made your money back in the value of your house. And here come the tax increases again, right? They're going to go up.
Yep. I don't think I've seen any sort of break since then. But yeah, there's
certainly. Go ahead.
Oh, there's a couple things that you brought up, though, that I think are worthwhile to kind of dig a little bit deeper into. And the first one being, you're talking a lot about after retirement, having these kind of fixed expenses and these, your house price, your insurance, your cable internet, even. A lot of times people have a little bit of a reduction in their monthly income as a result of retirement. So how can they protect themselves against that and right size their living expenses?
Well, it's a great question. So again, begin with the end in mind is what is the budget? Have they really sat down to figure out all the true expenses that they're going to be dealing with? And before they put in those retirement papers, do they have an ironclad financial plan with proper projections? Proper projections would include inflation adjustments, rates of return on their money, any boosts or potential movements in income, like does their pension get a cost of living increase? How much would Social Security go up? So again, all these nuances have to be considered. And then is their money outperforming the distributions they're taking? Meaning, if I'm taking 5% of my assets out, am I growing by at least 5, 7, 9% to keep my assets from going negative and shrinking? And that's okay based upon the size of their assets. It could be a perfectly stable financial plan to shrink their assets down, but it just depends. And it depends on how big the asset base is, and it depends on the volume of shrinking. In my retirement planning seminars, I call this your lines crossing. So we do an exercise about understanding your X factor. What is your personal X and X factor? And then more importantly is when do my lines cross that impact that X factor? And so my lines crossing means I'm now in a negative cash flow environment. I'm spending more than I'm generating and bringing in, and I'm nibbling at my nest egg. And again, that's fine. If I've got $50 million and I'm spending $10,000 more a year, nobody's crying. If I've got $500,000 a year and I'm spending $50,000 more, well, now in 10 years, you're going to run out of that money or less because you're not getting the revenue off of it and you're not allowing it to maintain itself. So it's going to cannibalize. Again, depending on their age, depending on what else is going on. So a lot of what we do is look at the timelines and the usages of money. So again, as part of the financial plan is you have to think about when am I using this asset? When am I using that asset? When do I start collecting Social Security? When do I take my 401k distributions? How do I turn on all of those different mechanisms? Can I live on just my pension? Well, raise your hands if you even have a pension out there. Like most people don't have pensions anymore. It's very reliant on their 401ks. And a lot of people are not properly funding their 401ks. That's going to be their mainstay of their retirement nest egg, and they're not participating. They're not understanding, or they're getting in very late and they can't play catch up. And guess what happens when they start playing catch up? The next market crash comes along, they get kicked in the teeth and they go, well, this isn't for me. I just lost half my money, and they stop. Well, those cycles ebbs and flows. And depending on when we're releasing this, I'm pretty much on the platform that the next correction's coming. I don't know when, but we're overdue. It's been a good 10, 12 years. So it's going to happen. And so are you prepared? Is your asset diversification strong enough to weather the next storm? And that storm could be 3 months. It could be 3 years. It could be a decade. Again, the younger folks listening out there, go back and look at history of the 1970s. The stock market basically did nothing for a 10-year window. We had super high inflation, high oil prices, high gas prices. The economy was in a recession. Start sound familiar? Interest rates as of today's recording on a 30-year mortgage are over 8%. My first house in 1985, it was 10%. My first house was $118,000.
Yeah.
My wife and I were making $37,000 a year. Our first jobs out of college. Okay. That mortgage payment was over $1,000 a month. Now that's people's car lease. That townhouse is probably over $500,000 now in today's dollars. If I've got an 8% mortgage at $500,000, I guarantee you somebody making $37,000 a year can't afford that. So what's the math? I've been asking realtors and mortgage brokers, like, what's the math for somebody to qualify on a $500,000 mortgage at 8%? I haven't done the math yet. I'll get the numbers for next time. Okay. But it's not a young couple making 37 grand. It's not an individual making 37 grand. It's almost impossible. Okay. And then factor in taxes and insurance and everything else in their life. So anyway, we digress. So let's get back to our nearing retirement scenario here. So this client has a pension. There's going to be benefits to his spouse called survivor benefits, Allie. He's got to understand exactly what his offset is, meaning he's going to get option A is going to be his highest amount of monthly income for his pension. But if he dies before his wife, that pension stops. Option B is going to be he's going to take less of his pension, maybe 10% less, and that's going to give his wife a 50% survivor benefit. And then option C might be a 20% reduction, but she gets the full amount of that benefit. So again, I'll put some numbers behind it. And again, I don't know what his is yet. We're still working on it. But if his pension's $5,000, he dies, she gets nothing. He takes $4,500, he gives up $500 a month, and she'll get half of that. She'll get half of the $4,500 is $2,250. And we look at the numbers and they might say, well, she can't afford a survivor benefit of only $2,250, like it's not enough money. So then they come down and they go to $4,000. He gives up $1,000 a month, $12,000 a year at 62 years of age. And if he were to predecease her, she gets the same $4,000. And unbeknownst to the pros or cons and having conversations with professionals like us, is most people will take option C without any kind of conversation and number crunching. And so the question now is, that's $12,000 a year. If this guy lives 25 years into retirement, what's 12 times 25? 25,000 times 300 grand? Yeah, 300 grand. So he's making a $300,000 decision. He's giving up $300,000 of his money to protect his wife's income. So if they both live to 90 and die the same day, well, he just threw away a ton of money. He passes away a week after retirement, God forbid. Well, now that he made a good decision, right? Because she's going to be taken care of. So you tell me when you're going to pass away, Allie, and I'll give you the perfect financial plan. I say it all the time. Like, you don't have an expiration date on your big toe, do you? Like milk? Like, human beings aren't born with an expiration date. It would be a wonderful way to live, maybe. I don't know. But if I knew financially, well, like if I know what
financially, sure, but I don't know about
well, but think about how many. We have to go down this rabbit hole. But think about how many people that just kind of meander through life and then really don't live to their potential and enjoyment. But if I knew I only had 6 more months, what would I be doing differently? Right? I could take certainly certain measures, knowing, hey, and that's the cruel irony of life is we don't know. We don't know. We make preparations, but there's no back end. So now how do I prepare for something that's so unknown? And so that's the challenge, that if I live to 93, right? If I this, if I that. Well, if I die at 62, what happens? Right? And so you're trying, my point of this is you're trying to give people an understanding of how to massage all of this. How do you prepare it? How do you make it work? How do you put the ebbs and flows in there to say, look, here's scenario 1, 2, and 3. Based upon scenario 1, this is how it's going to play out. Based on scenario 2, and then based on scenario 3. And all we're trying to do is, in conjunction of those different scenarios, have high levels of confidence that their plan is solid. And then life's going to take us the rest of the way. Because if inflation rears its ugly head and the markets go down, they're not making rates of return that they had forecasted, and their expenses went up. They're going to have to change their lifestyle. So that's the ongoing challenge, the ongoing process here. So as we wrap up this session, Allie, the things you need to know as our takeaways today, if you're working in a corporate environment, you need to know what your benefits package includes. You need to know if your life insurance is portable. We didn't get into that, but if you have life insurance provided through your company, if it's portable, means you could take it with you after retirement. You need to know what that program looks like, what those costs look like. And then you need to compare that to privately placed life insurance to make sure it's the better value for you. A lot of times you're 60 plus years of age, you may not be insurable anymore. If you need life insurance in those later years, you can't rely on your company's life insurance, especially if it's not portable. You say, oh, I still needed to have something. Well, now you're uninsurable. What are you supposed to do? So you need to look at that earlier. Sidebar conversation. Pension options, what to do there, 401k, contributions, distributions, rollover. How does that tie into your estate plan? What's the value of your estate? What kind of trust work might you need? Again, there's a lot of layers to this onion here. First and foremost, you can't retire if you don't have a budget. You just can't. You can, but you can't. You should. So you need to know your numbers. You need to know your cash flow, your debt ratios, what kind of lifestyle you want to have. You can't just get a cell phone for the next 15 years. The technology changes constantly. Every 3 to 4 years, your phone's becoming obsolete. And the prices aren't going down, they're going up. And now they're financing them. So you constantly have a payment from Verizon, AT&T, and T-Mobile that never seem to go away. That's now a fixed expense in retirement. If you're always going to have a cell phone, you're going to have that just like your cable bill, just like your power and electric, okay, gas and electric, right?
They start offering you upgrades like well before you even finish making your payments. Right. Like, oh, you're about halfway in. Here's your upgrade.
Right. And so it keeps the meter running where you're constantly, and it might only be $30 or $40 a month, but 2 phones. But again, it's not something that's going away. And so my pet peeve with that is similar to car leasing. Is the younger generations, the last 30 plus years where car leasing came about. Well, back in the day, you financed a car, you bought it, you owned it, you maybe kept it for a few years after it was paid off, ran it into the ground, and eventually got another one. Well, car leasing made it more pleasant and favorable to get a fancy new car every couple of years. But now you become entrenched with that payment. And again, I'm not passing judgment on it, but if your lifestyle is such, well, then you need to add that to your budget. I'm always going to be leasing a car. My car lease is $600 a month, and I need to add that into my budget long term. Or, hey, I like buying 3-year-old used cars and then keeping them for 10 years. Well, that's a lot lower monthly expense in somebody's budget. So when you get to retirement, those are things you're going to have to be looking into. Can I be a 1-car family when I used to be a 2-car family? Well, now that you're both home, nobody's commuting to work anymore. Can I get away with just having 1 car, eliminating that expense, eliminating the insurance, right? The purchasing. So again, these are challenges people need to be addressing. So think about your take-home pay, work on your budgets, see where your cash flow is going, sharpen your pencil. What's your woody woofy? What do I want for myself? What do I envision retirement as a young, healthy 62-year-old? How much traveling do I want to do? Where am I expending my money? And then when potentially might I slow that down? So again, a 62-year-old might say, I want to spend this amount of money till I'm 75, and then I'm willing to shrink it a little bit. And I'll shrink it from 75 to 80, and I'll shrink it again at 80 to 85. And by 85, I'm probably going to be pooped out. I may not want to travel as much as I used to or spend that money and, see what other phases of life go about. And then again, the long-term care conversation is, well, what happens at 85 and 90 when I start to need facilities or care or other things because my health is diminished and I'm afraid of running out of money? And so then the conversation of long-term care insurance comes into play. So that's our kind of bowl of joy conversation for today, Allie. I hope everybody enjoyed it. Please hit me up in the comments, share this episode. Need everybody's help here. Come hit us up at planman.tv, Ask The Planman at Instagram and Facebook and YouTube. We're everywhere. If you need some advice, always get it right. Come ask the Plan Man. Until next time, Allie, thanks for being with us, and we'll see you next time.
When you need some advice, never sacrifice, always get it right. Ask the Plan Man. Finance, insurance, and more.